The frequently asked questions document for the income-driven repayment one-time waiver has finally been released, and in it there's a ton of information that will help you get your student loans closer to having them forgiven, reduced, reorganized, or expedited. In this episode, we tell you some of the key details you need to know. Let's get started. Are your student loan payments or loan balances a major obstacle in your financial life? Then tune in and let's escape student loan debt. Hello, my name is Brenton Harrison of Escape Student Loan Debt and your host for the Escape Student Loan Debt podcast. Over the last several months, really, we've been talking about this one-time income-driven repayment plan waiver. And as a part of that waiver, they have allowed student loan borrowers who have federal student loans and are trying to have them forgiven, see those credits towards forgiveness counted for periods that typically would not have counted. And we've talked about all the different rules, all the different guidelines, but one of the things we've been waiting on is the frequently asked questions document that gave more specific details as to the timing of implementation and also who is and is not eligible. So that document has finally been released, and in this episode we're going to walk you through what it says so you know to whom it's applicable and to whom it is not. I'll give you a little preview. Everyone can have a federal student loan made eligible for this program, but there are certain things that you have to do by a certain time period in order to benefit. So let's start, and if you're following along with us on screen, you'll see that we are looking at the document itself on the Federal Student Aid website. We'll put a link to this in the show notes. Let's start with who this income-driven repayment plan waiver is for. This waiver is for people who have been on an income-driven repayment plan in the past, they are in or pursuing public service loan forgiveness, or they're not on an IDR plan, but they have a federal loan that they're trying to make eligible. So all of these people are going to be able to get some value out of this program. So let's talk about the three different groups that you might fall in terms of eligibility. Income-driven repayment plans, as a refresher, are payment plans that rather than basing their payment off of what's needed to actually pay the loan off in full, they instead base payments off of a certain time period and percentage of your income. If you pay X percent of your income towards your student loans for 20 or 25 years, for these newer plans, in some cases 10 years. After that period of time, if you have any student loan balances left, those balances will be forgiven. Now, the problem is that many people had periods where they should have been receiving credit, but they weren't because of something that their student loan servicer told them that was inaccurate. There are other people who have been languishing on other types of plans that aren't income-driven repayment plans, like the graduated plan, the graduated extended plan. And there are others who have just been paying a mountain of debt off on a conventional type of repayment plan called the standard plan, which would be just like paying off a mortgage or a car loan. Well, this waiver, through a number of different allowances, is treating all of those payments that wouldn't have counted in the past towards the 20 or 25 years needed for forgiveness. And once those credits are applied, you would fall into one of three camps. The first is you would have your credits adjusted, but you would still have time left before you meet your 20 or 25 year requirement. If that's the case, this waiver will get you closer, but you won't have your loans automatically forgiven, but you'll be significantly closer than you would have been in the past. The second group are federal student loan borrowers who, as a result of this one-time adjustment, do have at least 20 or 25 years that they've been paying. And as a result, even though many of those payments wouldn't have counted in the past, their student loans will be automatically forgiven when adjusted for the income-driven repayment plan waiver. And then the third group are people who, once they have their credits adjusted, not only are they eligible to have their student loans forgiven, the Department of Education will find that they have paid way more than the 20 or 25 years that are required. Maybe they have 26, or in some cases 22, or in some cases 30 years worth of payment history. And if that's the case, not only will their student loans be forgiven automatically, they will also receive a refund for the payments that they made that were above and beyond that 20-25 year requirement. So let's talk about the timeline of when they'll make these adjustments before we get to what the actual adjustments will be. If you have student loans that have been in repayment for at least 20 or 25 years, your loans will be reviewed first to see what credits are applicable. The reason that's the case is while they may not know if all of those months count towards the income-driven repayment plan waiver, they at least know that you have a higher likelihood of having all of your loans automatically forgiven once those adjustments are made. So as a result, they put you at the top of the pile. Now, the excellent thing about this is remember there was also For people who are in public service, a public service loan forgiveness waiver that ended on October 31st of last year, Halloween of 2022. And that was another program that gave you adjusted credits towards the 10 years that was needed for public service loan forgiveness. But since it expired, there were many people who didn't get their applications in time and thought they missed the ball. Well, the great thing about the IDR waiver is as they make the adjustments for income-driven repayment, they are applying those credits to public service loan forgiveness as well. So if you can prove that not only is your income-driven repayment adjustment necessary, but that you are also working in public service during those now credited months, that PSLF credit will be updated as well. So now let's talk about the months that will be adjusted that would not have counted in the past. The first is something we've talked about ad nauseum. Any months you've made towards any federal student loan payment plan, regardless of the payment that you made, the type of loan that you had, as long as it was a federal loan, whether it was a late payment, an on-time payment, a full payment, a partial payment, all of those months will now count towards your 20 or 25 years, whereas in the past, late payments didn't count, partial payments didn't count, and obviously only the payments made towards income-driven repayment plan counted. Next, something we've also talked about. Student loan forbearance is a period where you put your student loan payments on pause, and many times as a result of your inability to make the payments financially. Well, one of the things that was found was that student loan servicers were pushing people towards forbearance and doing so unnecessarily. So as a result, if you were in forbearance for more than 12 months consecutively or 36 months cumulatively, the periods exceeding those numbers will be counted. So if you had a forbearance that went 15 months consecutively, months 13, 14, and 15 would be counted. You also will have counted any months spent in economic hardship or military deferments in 2013 or later. Believe it or not, when you used to be in deferment for military service, they would not give you credit in some cases towards your student loans. They are correcting that. They're also giving credits for any months spent in deferment before 2013. Now, the small exception to this is it couldn't be in-school deferment. So there's deferment and then there's forbearance. If you were in forbearance, it's that 12 months or 36 months barrier. If you were in deferment and that deferment was before 2013 and not because you were in school, it counts no matter what. And then lastly, this is a huge one. If you have a student loan that you are consolidating in order to be eligible for this program, and we'll talk after the break about who that would be, then any time you spent in repayment before that loan was consolidated will now count. That is a departure from how it's worked previous to this program, where any time that you had paid towards your loans before you consolidated was wiped away, and that new direct consolidation loan had to stand on its own and start from month one. That now changes. And lastly, if you had a student loan in default and you exited out of default through the Fresh Start initiative, they will give you credit for the months that you were even in default from March 2020 through the month that your loans exited default. So a huge opportunity here for student loan borrowers. After the break, we're going to show you a sample student aid data file. We showed you how to download that in previous episodes, and we'll show you an example of a period in which the student loan credits that this person had applied to their account may not line up with what they may have after the income-driven repayment plan waiver.
This is the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast,
a show for established professionals whose student loan payments or loan balances are impacting their marriage, their business, their credit, or their dream of achieving home ownership.
We'll be right back.
Are you interested in learning the tools and techniques we use to get student loans forgiven, reduced, reorganized, or expedited? Well, great news. We're currently updating our flagship course, Escape Student Loan Debt, to reflect the current changes in the student loan landscape. To stay up to date on the launch of the course and opportunities to sit in on our live recording sessions, head to escapestudentloandebt.com and join our email list now.
You're listening to the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast.
Subscribe now at escapestudentloandebt.com.
Welcome back.
Before the break, we talked about periods where you might see credits adjusted even when you are not making a payment towards your student loans. And if you're following along with us on screen, we have a sample student aid data file. We reviewed this in previous episodes, and we've talked about how as you scroll down to this file, you will actually see a listing of every single student loan that you ever took out. Even if that loan has been paid off or since consolidated, it will all be towards the top of your student aid data file. Now, if you've consolidated a loan, or if you have like an old FEL or a Perkins loan, I encourage you to find one of the oldest loans that you have and take a look at the payment history, because when you find each individual loan, as we're showing you on the screen, it will not only show you the loan repayment period begin date. In this example, this person started repaying their loans for the first time in October 30th of 2012. It will show you the balance that you had on that loan, but most importantly, to the income-driven repayment plan waiver, it will show you the periods of time that that loan had different statuses when it comes to its repayment. As an example, I can see that this loan was originated. This person took out this loan in July of 2012. They then went into their grace period in April of 2013. This is likely when they graduated. So this student loan went into grace period of April 2013. Now, most people have a 6-month grace period, so I would then expect that 6 months later, their status would change to in repayment. And you can see that 6 months later, October of 2013, their loans went into repayment status. Now, they were only in repayment status for 2 short months, and in December of that same year, they went into forbearance. I happen to know a bit about this borrower. This was a person who went into medical residency, and they were worried they couldn't make their payment, so they went into forbearance. And you can see that their loan stays in forbearance from December 2013 to December 2015. Now, this is potentially a period of time where they went beyond the 12 months consecutive forbearance that is allowed. Their student loan servicer should have seen them exit forbearance, go into repayment, and if necessary, go back into forbearance. But there shouldn't be a 2-year consecutive period where it says forbearance. So this period of months 13 through 24 is a potential year where this borrower was not making payments at all, but they could, through the income-driven repayment plan waiver, see those loans credited towards their 20 or 25 years towards forgiveness. Or in this case, because I know this person worked in public service, the 10 years that they need before their loans are wiped away. And later on in their student loan history, you can see this happen again. They go into forbearance in July of 2017, and they go back into repayment 2 years later in August of 2019. Yet another potential year that they could have credit. Because now not only are we bumping up against that 12 months consecutively, we may also be exceeding the 36 months of cumulative forbearance that they can have towards this loan. So here's an example of understanding how to read your student aid document so that if the Department of Education doesn't give you the proper credits, even in this adjustment, you have a case that can be made for them to go back and look at your account for these periods that you've identified rather than waiting for them. Now, let's end this with who is eligible. In order to have this income-driven repayment plan waiver applied to your account, the student loans you have to be federal-owned loans. We've talked about how you can have direct loans, but you can also have FFEL loans that are owned and managed by the federal government, but you can have FFEL loans that are owned and managed by private entities. They're just guaranteed by the federal government. Now, I've said multiple times, in my opinion, if you have an FFEL loan, the best thing for many reasons is to just consolidate it into a direct consolidation loan. There are so many programs, one of them being public service loan forgiveness, where because you just can't have an FFEL loan to be eligible, consolidating into a direct loan is the right choice. Now, for this waiver, they actually will give credit towards FFEL loans that are owned and managed by the federal government. But because you don't know if that's the case, and also for those other reasons I just mentioned, I would highly encourage you to consolidate FFEL loans into a direct consolidation loan. We'll put a link in the show notes to an episode where we talk about how to consolidate those student loans. But all of these things are working together to put you in a much better position as it relates to having your student loans forgiven, reorganized, reduced, expedited. And I'm hoping this was valuable to you in that path moving forward, because as student loan payments restart in the fall, this is crucial information you need to know before things kick back up again. See you soon. From Escape Student Loan Debt, this was the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast, a show for established professionals whose student loan payments or loan balances are impacting their marriage, their business, their credit, or their dream of achieving homeownership.